For a Roman soldier, surviving 20 years of war was not simply the end of battle. It was the end of one life and the uncertain beginning of another. By the time a man completed his service, he was no longer the young recruit who had first taken the military oath. He had marched across mountains and deserts, crossed rivers under fire, slept in mud and snow, fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat, and watched friends die beside him. He had lived under strict discipline, followed orders without question, and spent more of his adult life in camps and on campaign than in any permanent home. After 20 years in the Roman army, survival itself was a kind of victory, but peace did not always come easily. A Roman soldier's service usually ended with an official discharge, known as an honorable release if he had served faithfully. This moment could be the proudest day of his life. He was no longer bound by military law. He no longer answered to a centurion's staff or the sound of the trumpet at dawn. He could finally choose where to go, what work to do, and how to live. For many soldiers, the reward for service came in the form of money or land. In earlier periods of Roman history, veterans were often granted farmland in newly conquered territories or in Roman colonies. This land was both payment and strategy. Rome used veterans to secure distant regions, spread Roman culture, and maintain loyalty in unstable provinces. A soldier who had spent decades fighting for Rome might suddenly find himself becoming a farmer in Spain, Gaul, North Africa, or the eastern provinces. For some, this was a welcome reward. For others, it was another hardship. Farming required skills not every soldier had, and the land was not always fertile or safe. In later periods, cash payments became more common. Emperors often gave veterans a lump sum upon discharge, enough to start a business, buy property, or support a family. But money could disappear quickly, especially for men who had spent most of their lives in military camps with little experience managing civilian finances. Some veterans returned to their birthplace, hoping to reunite with family. Yet after 20 years, home was often no longer the same. Parents might have died. Wives who had waited might have moved on, though legal marriage for many soldiers had been restricted during service. Children, if they had any through unofficial unions, could be grown or unfamiliar. Brothers and sisters had built lives without them. The village they remembered might have changed, declined, or vanished. For many veterans, returning home felt like arriving in a foreign land. Others chose not to return at all. Many settled near the forts or frontier towns where they had served. Military camps often grew into busy civilian settlements filled with merchants, craftsmen, former soldiers, and local families. Veterans already knew these places. They had connections there, and sometimes unofficial wives or children nearby. In these frontier communities, former soldiers could build new lives among men who understood war. The habits of military life were hard to break. After decades of structure, civilian life could feel disordered. In the army, every hour had purpose: marching, drilling, building camps, standing watch, maintaining weapons. In civilian life, there was no trumpet to wake them, no chain of command, no daily ration. Some veterans found freedom liberating. Others found it deeply unsettling. Men shaped by constant discipline sometimes struggled with idleness or with the slower rhythms of farming and trade. The physical scars of service were often permanent. A veteran might carry sword wounds, broken bones, damaged joints, or lasting disabilities from years of marching with heavy loads. Medical care in the Roman army could save lives, but it could not undo years of injury. Old wounds often returned with age. A limp, a missing finger, poor eyesight, or chronic pain could make work difficult. The body that survived battle was often worn down long before old age. The mental burden could be just as heavy, though the Romans had no modern language for trauma. A man who had seen massacres, sieges, executions, and the chaos of battle might carry fear, anger, or numbness into civilian life. Sudden noises might trigger memories of combat. Sleep could be broken by dreams of war. Roman culture valued toughness and endurance, so such suffering was rarely spoken of openly. A soldier was expected to remain strong, even after the fighting ended. Yet the memories remained. Veterans often held a respected place in Roman society. Completing full service was proof of discipline, loyalty, and endurance. A discharged soldier could receive documents confirming his rights and privileges. For non-citizen auxiliary soldiers, discharge often came with Roman citizenship. This was one of the greatest rewards Rome could offer. Citizenship brought legal protections, the right to marry officially, the right to own property under Roman law, and improved status for his children. For many men from distant provinces, military service was a path to a new identity. Some veterans used their experience to rise in society. They became local officials, tax collectors, traders, or landowners. Their military connections could open doors. Former centurions, in particular, often held influence because they had commanded men and managed logistics. Their leadership experience translated well into civilian administration. Others struggled. Not every veteran received what he had been promised. Corruption, political instability, or changes in emperors could delay or reduce rewards. Some were cheated out of land or pay. Others found themselves poor despite decades of service. A man who had spent his youth fighting might discover that peace offered little security. Some veterans re-enlisted. The army was the only life they knew. Experienced men could return in special roles as trainers, officers, or elite guards. Others joined local militias or worked as guards, escorts, or mercenaries. For some, war had become both profession and identity. Religion and ritual also shaped a veteran's life after service. Roman soldiers were deeply tied to military cults and religious practices. They had offered sacrifices before battle and thanked the gods after survival. In retirement, many continued worshipping Jupiter, Mars, Mithras, or local gods they encountered during campaigns. Veterans sometimes dedicated altars or inscriptions in gratitude for survival. These monuments still survive, silent reminders of men who endured. Family life, when possible, often began late. A veteran discharged in his 40s might finally marry legally and start a household. He might become a father when many civilians were already grandfathers. Raising children after decades of violence could be challenging. Yet many veterans sought stability through family, hoping to build in peace what war had denied them. Their children often inherited a mixed legacy, stories of battle, citizenship rights, and sometimes expectations of military service. In many regions, veterans helped spread Roman culture. They brought Latin language, Roman customs, architecture, and military discipline into frontier lands. Colonies of former soldiers became engines of Romanization, shaping local economies and politics. Roads, markets, baths, and temples often followed where veterans settled. In this way, a soldier's service continued long after he laid down his sword. Old age for a Roman veteran varied greatly. Some enjoyed relative comfort on productive farms or in prosperous towns. They became respected elders, telling stories of campaigns under famous generals or emperors. Others lived in poverty, dependent on family or local communities. There were no modern pensions beyond what had been granted at discharge. A bad harvest, illness, or political unrest could destroy years of stability. Still, surviving 20 years in the Roman army was itself extraordinary. Many never lived long enough to see retirement. Disease, wounds, exhaustion, and battle claimed countless lives before discharge. Those who survived had endured one of the harshest systems in the ancient world. They had built roads, walls, and forts, conquered kingdoms, defended borders, and enforced Rome's will across continents. Yet when the armor was removed and the sword set aside, they faced the oldest challenge of all, learning how to live without war. For some, retirement meant peace, land, family, and honor. For others, it meant pain, memory, and uncertainty. But in every case, the Roman soldier who survived 20 years of war carried Rome within him for the rest of his life. Even in peace, he remained marked by discipline, sacrifice, and survival, one of the many men whose labor and blood built an empire.